The war had been over for 3 years. At least, that's what the Galactic Council called it. They didn't use the word genocide in their official records. They called it necessary containment or threat elimination. But everyone in the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity was supposed to be extinct. The Council had made their decision with cold precision. Humans were too unpredictable, too creative, too stubborn to follow the natural order. Every other species in the galaxy had their place, their role, their predetermined path through the stars. But humans? They refused to stay in their lane. They questioned everything. They adapted to situations that should have killed them. They found solutions where none should exist. And that terrified the ancient powers who'd ruled for millennia. So the decree came down. Every human colony, every settlement, every ship, all marked for destruction. The war was brutal and one-sided. Humanity fought back with everything they had, showing exactly why the Council feared them. But numbers don't lie, and the entire galaxy against one species could only end one way. Now, 3 cycles later, the galaxy was quiet. Peaceful, the Council called it. Empty, others whispered when they thought no one was listening. Dragon Sentinel Tyler had served the Council for 200 years. His kind were the enforcers, the peacekeepers, the ones who made sure the laws were followed. Dragons were honor bound, their word absolute, their loyalty unquestionable. Tyler had never broken an oath in his entire life. He'd never even been tempted. Until today. He was on routine patrol near Draca Prime, scanning for debris from the old battles. The human colony ship called Perseverance had been destroyed in this sector during the final days of the war. Most of the wreckage had been cleared, but pieces still floated in the dark, reminders of what had been done. Tyler's sensors picked up something unusual. A power signature, faint but definitely active. That shouldn't be possible. Nothing should still be running after 3 years in the void. He moved closer, his massive wings carrying him through the debris field with practiced ease. Dragons didn't need ships for short-range travel. Their scales protected them from the vacuum, their bodies generating their own heat and oxygen through methods scientists still didn't fully understand. There, caught between 2 twisted hull plates was a cryopod. And according to his scans, it was still functioning. Tyler's heart, an organ the size of a small boulder, began to beat faster. Cryopods meant survivors. And survivors meant humans. And humans meant he had a duty to report this immediately to the Council. He reached out with one massive claw, carefully extracting the pod from the wreckage. His talons, each one longer than a human arm, moved with surprising delicacy. The pod was small, designed for one person. Through the frosted viewing port, he could see a shape inside. His duty was clear. He should call this in. Let the Council decide what to do. That was the law. That was his oath. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the 3 years of silence that had followed the war, the uncomfortable feeling that the galaxy felt emptier than it should. Maybe it was the small nagging voice that had started whispering to him in the quiet moments, asking if what they'd done was truly justice. Tyler opened the cryopod. The infant inside couldn't have been more than a few months old when the ship was destroyed. The cryosystems had kept the baby perfectly preserved, suspended in time while the galaxy moved on. As the pod systems disengaged and warmth flooded back, the child's eyes fluttered open. Those eyes looked up at Tyler. Dark brown, wide with confusion but not fear. The baby should have been terrified. Dragons were massive, fearsome creatures with scales like armor and teeth like swords. But this tiny human just stared up at him with curiosity. Something cracked inside Tyler's chest. Not physically, dragons were nearly indestructible. But something in his soul, in that part of him that had served the Council without question for 2 centuries, fractured and gave way. This was a baby. Not a threat. Not a strategic problem. Just an innocent child who'd done nothing wrong except be born human. The infant reached up with one tiny hand, fingers grasping at the air. Without thinking, Tyler extended one claw. The baby's entire hand couldn't even wrap around the tip of it, but the child held on anyway, that universal gesture of trust that transcends species. In that moment, Tyler made his choice. He pulled his comm unit from his belt and crushed it in his fist. Then he turned away from Draca Prime and flew toward the Scorched Marches, a lawless frontier region where ion storms scrambled all sensors and Council surveillance couldn't reach. He was a traitor now. An oath breaker. Everything he'd been raised to despise. But as he cradled the cryopod against his chest and flew toward the unknown, Tyler felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. He felt right. Behind him, the debris field faded into the distance. Ahead, the Scorched Marches waited, their storms flashing with purple lightning. And in his arms, a human baby slept, unaware that one dragon's choice had just changed the course of galactic history. Tyler named the boy Connor. It was a human name he'd found in the salvaged data from the Perseverance, meaning lover of wolves in an ancient Earth language. It seemed fitting for a human child raised by a creature most would consider a monster. The scorched marches became their home. It was a brutal place, a region of space where three star systems collided in a cosmic accident millions of years ago. The result was a pocket of reality where magnetic storms raged constantly, where temperatures swung from freezing to boiling in minutes, where the very laws of physics seemed to bend and twist. It was hell for most species. For Tyler and Connor, it was perfect. The storms hid them from every sensor in the galaxy. The Council's surveillance network, so vast it could track a single ship across 1,000 light-years, was completely blind here. They were invisible. But surviving required adapting, and Connor learned fast. Too fast, sometimes. Tyler would show him something once: how to read the thermal vents that warned of volcanic eruptions, how to predict when the magnetic fields would shift, and the boy would remember it forever. By age 3, Connor could navigate the canyon systems that Tyler used as shelter. By 5, he was hunting the crystalline scorpions that lived in the lava tubes, creatures whose venom could drop a full-grown vaccine in seconds. Tyler taught him everything he knew about survival. How to move silently across cracking ice fields. How to find water in rock formations that looked completely dry. How to read the sky and know when the storms would be at their weakest. The dragon had 2 centuries of experience, and he poured all of it into this small human child. But physical survival was only part of Connor's education. In the evenings, when they huddled in their volcanic cavern while storms raged outside, Tyler would pull out the data cores he'd salvaged from the Perseverance. They were heavily damaged, but enough survived to tell the story. Connor learned about Earth, the blue and green world his species came from. He watched videos of oceans and forests, things that didn't exist in the scorched marches. He learned about human cities, human art, human music. Tyler could see the hunger in the boy's eyes as he absorbed every detail, trying to understand a heritage he'd never experienced. And then came the harder lessons. The war. The genocide. The Council's decision. Connor was 7 when Tyler finally explained why they were hiding. The boy sat cross-legged on the cavern floor, lit by the orange glow of volcanic vents, and listened to the story of humanity's end. They were afraid of you, Tyler explained, his deep voice rumbling through the cave. Not because humans were violent. Not because you wanted to conquer anyone. They were afraid because they couldn't predict you. Connor frowned, his young face struggling with the concept. But why is that bad? Because the galaxy runs on order, Tyler said. Every species has its place. The Vaxians mine asteroids. The crystalline collective processes information. The Kelmar grow food on their agricultural worlds. Everyone has a role that was decided millions of years ago. But humans? You didn't fit. You'd be miners one day and scientists the next. You'd solve problems in ways no one had ever considered. You'd adapt to situations that should have killed you and come out stronger. So they killed us because we were good at surviving. The simple truth of it, spoken in a child's voice, hit harder than any accusation. Yes, Tyler said quietly. They killed you because you wouldn't stay in the box they tried to put you in. As Connor grew older, Tyler watched him prove exactly why the Council had been so terrified. The boy's mind worked differently than any species Tyler had encountered. Where the dragon would see a problem and apply a proven solution, Connor would look at it from 6 different angles and find an answer no one had considered. By age 10, Connor could outmaneuver Tyler in the canyon races they'd started using for training. The boy was smaller, weaker, couldn't fly like the dragon could. But he'd use that. He'd find routes through the narrow passages where Tyler's wings wouldn't fit. He'd predict where the thermal updrafts would be and use them to launch himself across gaps that should have been impossible. He'd win not through strength but through creativity. By 12, Connor had started tinkering with the salvaged human technology Tyler had collected over the years. Broken weapons, damaged sensors, pieces of equipment that hadn't worked in years. The boy would take them apart, study them, then put them back together in ways they were never designed for. At 15, Connor did something that made Tyler's blood run cold with a mixture of pride and fear. The boy had taken a human plasma rifle, a weapon that couldn't generate enough power to be useful anymore, and combined it with dragon scales Tyler had shed naturally. Somehow, Connor had figured out that dragon scales could store and amplify energy in ways human technology couldn't replicate. The result was a weapon that could cut through reinforced steel like it was paper. Tyler watched his adopted son test the weapon on a boulder, watched it slice through rock that had stood for millennia, and felt a deep dread settle in his chest. This wasn't just clever anymore. This was dangerous. This was exactly the kind of innovation that had made the Council decide humanity was too risky to exist. Connor was proving them right. And proving them wrong. Because yes, humans were unpredictable and adaptive and capable of terrifying creativity. But they were also loyal and curious and full of potential the galaxy had thrown away. Tyler knew their time was running out. You couldn't hide brilliance forever. Sooner or later, someone would notice. And when they did, the Council would come. The atmospheric processes gave them away. Connor was 16 when it happened. He'd installed air filtration systems throughout their cavern network, modifications to keep the volcanic fumes from being toxic. It was clever work, the kind of engineering that combined human innovation with dragon-crafted materials. But those processes left a signature. A chemical trace in the atmosphere. Nothing major, just a slight anomaly in the nitrogen-oxygen ratios that shouldn't exist in a dead volcanic system. The Council's hunting pack wasn't even looking for them. They'd come to the scorched marches tracking salvages who'd been stealing old military equipment from war debris. Illegal trade was common in the outer regions, and the pack made regular sweeps to keep it under control. But when their sensors picked up that atmospheric anomaly, everything changed. Lead Inquisitor Rachel was a crystalline, a species that looked like living glass shaped into humanoid form. Her kind didn't have emotions the way other species did. They processed information, analyzed data, and reached conclusions based purely on logic. That made them perfect for investigation work. Nothing clouded their judgment. Rachel stood on the bridge of her ship, her transparent form refracting the light from the view screens around her. She was reviewing the atmospheric data when she saw it. The signature was faint, but it was there. Processed air. Which meant life support. Which meant someone was living in a region where no one should be able to survive. She ran the chemical analysis 3 times to be certain. Then her form flickered with what might have been surprise if crystallines could feel such things. The air signature contained traces of human DNA markers. That was impossible. Humans were extinct. Every colony destroyed, every ship accounted for, every settlement burned. The war had been thorough. There were no survivors. Except the data didn't lie. And if there was one thing crystallines trusted, it was data. Rachel deployed her entire pack. 20 ships, carrying over 200 soldiers from a dozen different species. They surrounded the volcanic region in a perfect sphere, cutting off every escape route. Their sensors couldn't penetrate the magnetic storms, but they didn't need to. Whatever was down there couldn't get past them. She sent the signal. 1 hour to surrender peacefully, or they would breach the caverns by force. Deep underground, Tyler heard the proximity alarms Connor had installed months ago. The Dragon's enhanced hearing had picked up the ships before the sensors did, but seeing the scanner display confirmed his worst fear. They were surrounded. Completely. Connor stood beside him, studying the holographic display with frightening calm for someone his age. How long? The boy asked. They'll give us time to respond, Tyler said. Standard protocol is 1 hour before forced entry. They want us to surrender. We can't do that. Connor's voice was flat, stating a simple fact. If they know I'm human, they'll kill me. If they know you hid me, they'll kill you too. Tyler wanted to argue, but the boy was right. The law was clear. Harboring a human was treason. The penalty was death. There has to be a way out, Connor said, already moving toward their equipment cache. His mind was racing, Tyler could see it. The boy's eyes darted around the cavern, taking in every detail, processing possibilities. Then Connor stopped. He turned to look at the volcanic vents that lined the walls, the ones that had kept them warm through years of hiding. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the kind of smile that made Tyler nervous because it usually meant Connor had thought of something dangerous. Tyler, Connor said slowly. How heat-resistant are your scales? Very. Why? Because I have an idea. It's going to be really stupid, but I think it might work. Connor's plan was simple in concept, terrifying in execution. The volcanic system they lived in was dormant but not dead. Massive pressure had been building in the magma chambers below them for decades. Connor had been monitoring it, fascinated by the geological forces at work. With the right trigger, an explosive charge placed at exactly the right spot, they could cause a controlled eruption. Controlled? Tyler repeated doubtfully. Mostly controlled, Connor amended. The point is, when the eruption starts, the pack will have to pull back. Their ships can't handle that kind of heat and debris. But you can. We go down into the magma channels, let the eruption happen above us, and use the underground rivers of lava to travel. Your scales will protect us both. It was insane. But looking at the scanner showing 20 ships in position, Tyler couldn't think of a better option. They had 40 minutes. Connor spent it placing charges throughout the cavern system, creating a chain reaction that would wake the sleeping volcano. Tyler gathered their essential supplies, data cores, weapons, anything they couldn't replace. Everything else would burn. With 5 minutes left, they descended into the deepest part of the cavern system. The heat here was incredible, the rock glowing orange with barely contained energy. Connor wrapped himself in Tyler's wings, the dragon's scales forming a protective cocoon. "This is either brilliant or we're about to die," Connor said, his voice muffled against Tyler's chest. "Sometimes with you, I can't tell the difference," Tyler rumbled back. Connor triggered the charges remotely. The explosion was everything he'd calculated and more. The cavern system collapsed, sending shockwaves through the volcanic chamber below. Magma, suddenly given an escape route, surged upward with the force of a small nuclear weapon. Above ground, Rachel's senses went wild. The entire volcanic region was erupting, spewing lava and superheated gas into the atmosphere. Her ships scattered, pulling back to safe distance. But her cameras had been recording everything. And in the brief moments before the eruption destroyed them, they'd captured something impossible. A dragon, carrying something in its wings. Something human-sized. The footage was grainy, damaged by the heat and electromagnetic interference. But it was enough. Rachel transmitted everything to the council immediately. Her logical mind had already reached its conclusion. A human had survived. And a dragon had hidden it. The implications would shake the entire galaxy. 300 kilometers away, Tyler and Connor emerged from an underground lava tube, covered in ash but alive. Behind them, the volcano painted the sky orange. They'd escaped. But the galaxy now knew their secret. The message reached them 3 days after their escape. It came through encrypted channels, bouncing between relay stations in a pattern designed to avoid council detection. Tyler almost ignored it, trusting unknown contacts was a good way to get captured. But the message contained information only someone who'd been watching them could know. Details about the eruption. About their escape route. About Connor. "Meet us at Outpost Sigma 7, the message read. "You're not alone. Neither is he." That last line made Tyler's decision. If there were others, if Connor wasn't the only human left, they had to know. Outpost Sigma 7 turned out to be an abandoned mining station in the Void Belt, a region of space so empty and unremarkable that even the Council's vast surveillance network mostly ignored it. The station looked dead from the outside, just another derelict left over from the old expansion era. But as they approached, hidden defenses came alive, scanning them, analyzing them, then granting them passage. Inside, Tyler and Connor found something neither expected. People. Dozens of different species, all working together. And among them, scattered throughout the station like precious jewels, were humans. Connor stood frozen at the airlock door. He'd seen videos of other humans, studied them in the Perseverance's data cores. But he'd never actually met one. Never heard another human voice speaking to him. Never seen faces that looked like his own. An older human woman approached them. Her name was Diana, and she'd been a colony administrator before the war. Her hair was gray now, her face lined with years of hiding, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "We thought we were the last ones," she said, looking at Connor with something like wonder. "The council was so thorough. But here you are. Alive. And raised by a dragon, if the reports are right." "How many?" Connor asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How many survived?" Diana's expression grew sad. 43 humans. Scattered across the galaxy. Each one saved by someone who chose conscience over law. We've been searching for survivors for years, gathering those we could find. 43. Out of billions. Connor felt the weight of that number settle on his shoulders. Over the following days, Connor learned the truth about the galaxy he'd been hiding from. The war hadn't ended with humanity's extinction. It had simply changed. A Kelmar engineer named Harris explained it while showing Connor the station's power systems. The Kelmar were agricultural specialists, a peaceful species that had never raised a weapon in their entire history. But lately, some Kelmar colonies had started questioning the Council's decisions. Started adapting their farming techniques in unauthorized ways. Started, in essence, thinking like humans had. "The Council doesn't know what to do with us," Harris said, his four-fingered hands gesturing nervously. "They can't exactly genocide another species so soon after humanity. The other species are watching now. But they've started talking about containment measures and behavioral correction programs. We know what that means. It wasn't just the Kalmar. A vaccine miner named Cole told Connor about his species discovering new mining techniques that broke with centuries of tradition. A Thrain scientist named Riley described her people's sudden interest in theoretical physics that went beyond their assigned role as medical specialists. The adaptability that had doomed humanity was spreading. Species that had followed the same patterns for millions of years were suddenly changing, growing, evolving beyond their predetermined paths. And the council was terrified. They thought they could eliminate the problem by eliminating humans, Diana explained during a strategy meeting. But they couldn't eliminate the idea. You showed the galaxy what was possible. That species could be more than what they were assigned to be. And now that idea is spreading like wildfire. The Remnant Coalition, as they called themselves, had been forming in the shadows. Sympathetic members of dozens of species, all connected by one belief, that the Council's rigid order was suffocating the galaxy's potential. They wanted change. They wanted freedom. And they wanted Connor to be their symbol. You're the proof that cooperation works, Diana said, gesturing to Tyler standing beside the boy. A human and a dragon. Natural enemies in the Council's eyes, raising each other up instead of tearing each other down. Your story could inspire the entire galaxy. Connor listened to all of it. The passionate speeches, the strategic plans, the hope in their eyes when they looked at him. And then he shook his head. No, he said simply. The room fell silent. Diana frowned. No? I won't be your symbol, Connor said. Tyler taught me something important. Symbols are targets. You paint a target on me, you make me into this inspirational figure, and the Council will spend every resource they have hunting me down. And when they find me, and they will, what happens to your movement then? Then what do you suggest? Diana asked, her voice challenging. Connor looked around the room at the gathered species. Humans, Kelmar, Vaxians, Thrains, even a few dragons who defected like Tyler had. All of them looking to him for answers. Tyler taught me to survive by adapting, Connor said. By thinking differently than my enemies expected. By solving problems in ways that shouldn't work. That's what made humans dangerous, right? Our ability to think outside the patterns everyone else followed. He stood up, moving to the center of the room. So don't make me a symbol. Let me be a teacher instead. Every species here thinks differently. You all have patterns, ways of approaching problems that were ingrained in you over millions of years. But I was raised outside all that. I learned to think like a human because that's all I knew. And I can teach you to do the same. A vaccine named Jordan spoke up. Teach us to think like humans? How? By unlearning everything you think you know about problem solving, Connor said. Humans didn't survive Earth by being the strongest or the fastest. We survived by being creative. By trying things that seemed stupid or impossible. By failing 100 times until we found the one solution that worked. That's what I can teach you. Not how to follow me, but how to think for yourselves in ways the Council can't predict. Tyler watched his adopted son address the room, saw the way people leaned forward, actually considering his words. The dragon felt a surge of pride. This was the boy he'd raised. Not a figurehead to be protected, but a force of change that couldn't be stopped. Diana studied Connor for a long moment, then slowly smiled. You know what? That might actually work better than making you into some kind of legend. Legends can be killed. But ideas. She shook her head. Ideas are harder to destroy. Much harder, Connor agreed. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn every person in this rebellion into someone who thinks like a human. We're going to spread that ability across every species willing to learn. And when the Council finally comes for us, and they will, they won't be fighting one human and his dragon. They'll be fighting an entire galaxy that learned to dream. The room erupted in discussion, voices overlapping as people debated the proposal. But Connor could see it in their eyes. Hope. Real hope, not just for survival, but for actual change. Tyler leaned down, his massive head close to Connor's ear. You know this means we're about to start a real war, not just run and hide. Connor nodded, his expression serious beyond his years. I know. But we were always heading here, weren't we? The only question was whether we'd face it alone or together. Together, then, Tyler rumbled. Always together. The Council's response came 6 months after Connor began teaching. They called it the Purge Fleet, 200 warships carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire planets. Lead Inquisitor Rachel commanded from the flagship Absolute, her crystalline form reflecting the cold light of 1,000 tactical displays. The Council had given her one mission: eliminate the remnant coalition completely. No survivors this time. No mistakes like they'd made with humanity. But Rachel was hunting an enemy that no longer followed the old patterns. The first battle happened at the mining colonies of Vaxa 7. The Council expected a standard defensive formation, ships in organized lines, predetermined tactics, predictable responses. Instead, they found chaos. Remnant ships attacked from impossible angles, used mining equipment as weapons, retreated through asteroid fields that should have torn their ships apart but somehow didn't. A Kelmar freighter, supposedly unarmed, suddenly deployed weapons cobbled together from agricultural processes that could superheat ice into plasma. A Thrain medical ship released clouds of nanoparticles that disrupted Council sensors in ways their designers never imagined. The Council won that battle through sheer numbers, but they lost 4 ships to an enemy that should have been crushed in minutes. Rachel analyzed the data and reached a disturbing conclusion. The enemy was thinking unpredictably. They were thinking like humans. Over the next months, the pattern repeated. Every engagement showed the same impossible creativity. The remnant was smaller, weaker, outgunned in every way. But they won battles they had no business winning because they refused to fight the way the Council expected. Connor's teaching was working. He'd spent those 6 months breaking down how humans approach problems. Not through superior strength or ancient wisdom, but through trial and error, through combining ideas that didn't belong together, through asking what if instead of accepting that's how it's always been. A Vaxian pilot named Jordan perfectly demonstrated the change. Vaxians were miners, not warriors. They'd never developed combat tactics because they'd never needed them. But Jordan took mining techniques, how to predict where ore deposits would be, how to drill through unstable rock without causing collapse, and applied them to space combat. She could predict where enemy ships would move, find the weak points in their formations, strike at the exact moment when their defenses were shifting positions. She wasn't a better pilot than the Council's warriors. She just thought about the problem differently. The decisive moment came at the Nexus Gates. It was the most important strategic location in the galaxy, an ancient structure that controlled access to the hyperspace network. Whoever held the gates controlled travel between star systems. The Council couldn't let the Remnant take it. The Remnant couldn't win the war without it. Both sides knew this was where it would be decided. Tyler led the Dragon Warriors who defected to the Remnant cause. There were only 37 of them, compared to the Council's 300. But they fought with something the Council's dragons had forgotten: belief in what they were protecting rather than just following orders. Connor commanded the tactical center, coordinating teams that shouldn't exist. Humans working with Kelmar. Vaxians partnering with Thrains. Species that had never even spoken to each other before the war, now trusting each other with their lives. The battle was brutal. Ships exploded in silence across the void. The gates themselves shook under the barrage, ancient systems flickering as both sides poured firepower into the space around them. Rachel watched from the Absolute's bridge, her crystalline mind processing thousands of data points per second. The Remnant was outnumbered 3-1, outgunned 5-1. By every logical calculation, they should be losing. But they weren't. They were holding. And in some sectors, they were actually pushing back. Then Connor's team executed a maneuver that should have been impossible. A human engineer named Alex, working with a Kelmar named Harris and a Vaxian named Cole, had figured out how to temporarily overload the gate's energy distribution. It created a pulse that disabled every ship within range, friend and enemy alike. For exactly 90 seconds, the entire battlefield went dark. In those 90 seconds, Remnant forces moved using pure momentum and manual calculations. They'd practiced this. Trained for it. The Council forces, dependent on their automated systems, were blind. When the systems came back online, the Absolute was surrounded. Not by warships, but by a dozen small craft that had attached themselves to the hull like parasites. Connor's voice came through on the open channel. Lead Inquisitor Rachel. Your shields are down. Your weapons are offline. Your crew is unharmed. I'm giving you a choice. Rachel's form flickered with what might have been confusion. What choice? The same choice Tyler gave me 16 years ago, Connor said. You can follow your programming, stick to the mission you were given, and die here when we breach your hull. Or you can choose something different. Choose to see what we're actually fighting for. I am crystalline, Rachel responded. We do not have choices. We follow logic. Then follow it now, Connor said. Look at this battle. Really look at it. Your forces outnumber us massively. You have better ships, better weapons, better training. But you're losing. Why? Rachel's processors analyzed the question. She reviewed the battle data, the tactical patterns, the casualty ratios. You do not follow predictable patterns, she said slowly. You adapt. You improvise. You combine capabilities in ways that should not work but do. Exactly, Connor said. And that's just the beginning. Imagine what the galaxy could accomplish if every species was free to think this way. If everyone could reach beyond what they were assigned to be. The Council believes such freedom leads to chaos. The Council is wrong, Connor said simply. I'm proof of that. Tyler's proof of that. This entire fleet is proof of that. We're not chaos. We're potential. And you can either help us unlock that potential, or you can die defending a system that's terrified of change. For a long moment, there was silence. Rachel's crystalline form stood motionless on her bridge, processing probabilities, analyzing outcomes, running calculations that would have taken an organic mind hours. Then she did something no crystalline had done in their entire recorded history. She ignored her programming. I choose to see, Rachel said. The war didn't end that day. The Council had centuries of momentum behind them, fleets scattered across the galaxy, species who still believed in the old order. But the tide had turned. Rachel's defection sent shockwaves through the crystalline collective. If pure logic could change its mind, what did that say about the Council's position? More species joined the remnant. More dragons defected. More individuals chose to think for themselves rather than follow predetermined roles. Connor stood on the observation deck of the reclaimed Nexus gates, watching ships from a dozen different species working together to repair the ancient structure. Tyler stood beside him, the dragon's massive form somehow comforting rather than intimidating after all these years. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd left you in that cryopod? Tyler asked quietly. Connor smiled. Every day. But then I remember that you didn't. You chose compassion over duty. You chose to see a baby instead of a threat. And that one choice changed everything. You changed everything, Tyler corrected. I just kept you alive. No, Connor said, shaking his head. We changed it together. That's the whole point, isn't it? None of us can do it alone. Humans weren't special because we were stronger or smarter. We were special because we never tried to be alone. We built things together, solved problems together, dreamed together. Below them, a human engineer was showing a group of Kelmar technicians how to reroute power systems in ways their species had never considered. A vaccine pilot was teaching dragons new flight maneuvers. A crystalline, one of Rachel's followers, was learning from a Thrain how to factor intuition into logical decisions. The galaxy was learning to dream. And it had all started with one dragon who chose compassion, and one human who refused to be just a symbol. Tyler wrapped a wing around Connor's shoulders. Your species would be proud of you. Our species, Connor corrected gently. I'm human by birth. But you raised me. That makes me dragon too. I'm the son of two worlds. And maybe that's what the galaxy needs, people who belong to more than one world, who can bridge the gaps between species, who can show everyone that we're stronger together. The war would rage for years to come. There would be setbacks, losses, moments when victory seemed impossible. But standing there, watching the impossible happen as former enemies worked side by side, Connor knew they'd already won the important battle. They'd proven that change was possible. And once people knew change was possible, you couldn't make them forget it. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how it should be.